good morning, and good morning. Welcome to another edition of the Kitchings Table here on Awesome Radio, 106.9 FM, WBISLP, Roku, GPAC 23, Facebook Live, and of course on YouTube. You can find us each week. I'm your host, Earl Kitchings, and each week on the Kitchings Table, we're happy to bring you some news, information, thought-provoking ideas, anything that can engage the mind and get you thinking about something or sharing something with you that you had not thought about that could provide you with some interesting thoughts and reflections. Our title of our show today is Write It Down. Write it down. And, we've heard for years that to remember something important, a birthday, an appointment, somebody's name, directions, a recipe, it's always been a rule of thumb to write it down. That way we don't forget it. We can always go back and look at it. But you know what happens? We depend so much on our memory that we choose not to write some things down. And then when we call on that memory to bring it back, it's not like the computer. We can hit a button. We try to bring it back, and you hear the comments. Oh, it was right on the tip of my tongue. Oh, it was right here. I was thinking right of it. I couldn't remember it. Gee, I wish I could remember. Write it down. What about that great idea you had for a product or a service? Did you write it down? And you know how sometimes when you can be asleep at night, I know I am, I'll have an idea or a thought, and I'll choose not to get up to write it down, and hoping and thinking that when I wake up, I'll remember it, and poof, it's gone. So I've learned to put a writing instrument. Note, I said writing instrument because writing instruments come in a variety of styles. And we're going to talk about that in the pantry today, writing instruments. But a writing instrument and paper or a notebook or a pad or something where you can write it down, go back to sleep. These things are critical. And every day we either do or don't do these things, and the memory as we get older continues to get challenged by us making that strong effort to remember. In an article by Ariana Cohen, she starts off her article by saying, if you want to remember something, write it down. But here's the caveat she puts to it. Write it down by hand. Now, you can't write it down on a computer. That's not writing it down. When you write something down, it's best to write it down by hand. Now, I know some of us have bad handwriting. Can't read my own writing. That's the other challenge. You can't write well. It may not help to write it down. Writing and printing are two different things. Writing and printing are two different things. Of course, when we print things, those are like the alphabets. We write messages or thoughts down in a very distinct way. But when we're writing, from when I was growing up in old school, for those of you who remember old school, writing was cursive writing. They taught you how to write cursively so that you could write without having to make all those, lines with the alphabets. So in her article, Ariana Cohen, a new study from the University of Tokyo concludes that writing with a stylus or typing on a touchscreen keyboard just isn't the same as handwriting. It's not the same. So they started to look into this, and it states that handwriting facilitates learning and memorization because of the numerous one-of-a-kind physical cues it provides. The shapes of the letters, the tactile feel of the pen, paper and pen, the location of your words on the page, and detail like folded corners, ink color, other marks on the page. All these things help when we're writing things down to remember. As I said, memorization. We write things down not only to give us direction, but to remember when you go to the grocery store, shopping list or shopping off the top of your head. I do both. Most times it's off the top of my head, trying to remember what I need to purchase. But they say writing this down, and you probably will save some money if you write it down and just buy what's on that paper. But we tend to do it off the top of our head, and we start to buy some other things that we didn't think about or didn't write down. And in her article, she says your brain absorbs all of these pieces of information, which can later serve as triggers so that you can more precisely pull the information from your memory. Triggers to cause you to think about things, to remember things. So by comparison, when you enter information into a phone or a tablet, your words have no fixed position and they disappear when you close the app, leaving you without what you needed to have as your information, meaning your mind has to absorb what you wrote down. And if you get distracted and you don't remember, and that's another thing that causes us to totally not remember things. We get distracted. So we're trying to remember, then we get distracted. I'm trying to write it down, and I got distracted. I was thinking about, I was in the store the other day I needed two things. I got one, and I was like, what is the other thing? Oh my. So as soon as I walk out this store, I'm going to remember what it is. Or as soon as I get home, I'll remember what it is. And you know what? When I got home, I remembered what it was. So they did a study, and they found that some people wrote with pen and paper while others used a stylus on a tablet or a touch screen on a large phone. And then they asked them to recall all the information. And again, here's what they found out. The handwriters, those who wrote it down by hand, remembered things more accurately. And their brains displayed far more brain activity in areas associated with language, memory, navigation, visualization. The ones who wrote it on the tablet or touchscreen indicated that the mind's eye is recalling some of the information, but that's about it. So again, if it's important and you need to remember it, memorize it, have it around so you can refer back to it whenever you need to, write it down. Simple, but so difficult to do. So here's some tips that they suggested in this article for learning. And this is a process of learning when we write things down, because you can practice your handwriting, get it better. You can practice better ways to organize your thoughts and notes, your shopping list, what is priority and what is not, what you need versus what you want. Now, most of us go to the store and we always tend to want to purchase things by what we want. Sporadic purchasing. You go into a store looking for one thing and you see something else, and well, I didn't go to the store to buy that, but it was at such a good price I had to do it. Now, not knocking that, because of course I do that also. Didn't go in there to buy that item, but it was at such a great price. 2 months ago it was $30, and I went in the store, it was $10. I need to buy it right now because it may not be that price. I can remember going in Office Depot one day, and those expandable water hoses. I think those are probably one of the best inventions for, yard equipment that you could have, because those old vinyl hoses that you had to wrap around and around, they crack, they get old, it's hard to wrap them. Man, they had those retractable water hoses on sale for like $12 each. Now, those things go for about $30. $12. I got two of them, Should have gotten 4, but I was glad I got the 2 because, hey, almost 2 for 1. 2 for 1. So here's what they say for tips for better learning. Write notes in a book. Write notes in a book. A physical book. Write on printed paper. You can visualize and see what you want to write, and then write on the left side. Add your notes at the bottom of the page. Then it says add unique visual notes to digital documents. When you must read or write digitally, add spatial cues like virtual sticky notes, colored handwriting, and other one-of-a-kind marks. Highlighter is what this is suggesting. You write something down important, highlight it, draw a circle around it, put some stars by it, whatever you wanted to remember, change the color of it from black to a color on your computer. There are all kinds of ways to remember the things you wrote down. And it's important, again, you got to start with writing it down first, because if you don't, you're going to miss it. You're going to forget it. You know, the memory especially if you got a lot of things on your mind. Now, I don't know about some of you, and you've heard this slogan, I got a lot of things on my plate. People who work from plates, those are kind of regular people. Those who work from platters, which is a bigger size plate, those people have a lot more going on. But for those of us who work from the table, those are extraordinary people. And that means we got a ton of stuff going on. And managing that, or writing notes, or making notes, or keeping up with these things, writing in a notebook, writing on a short pad, wherever you got to write it and keep up with it, that helps. Because when you're working with a lot of things, if you have a lot of projects you're working on, you got a lot of materials you're trying to remember, making notes is critical. And it's a habit you have to learn and be repetitive about. So don't do it today and don't do it the next couple of times. Keep that notepad by you so you can write it down. And then the last thing they say is stick with paper and pen for creative pursuits. For art, composing music, or other creative works, they emphasize writing things down on paper instead of digital. True, you can lose the paper. The dog ate it. You ever lost some information on your computer because you didn't save it? Because you have to hit save on that computer in order to save what you just wrote. If you don't hit save, you close the computer or your laptop, or you close your computer and come back, it's gone. So there are a lot of things that possibly could go wrong electronically, but they say write it on paper. Your creativity will take on more of a priority, and it's more fruitful, as they state here, in learning when knowledge is stored. Knowledge. Which one is more difficult to obtain, knowledge or wisdom? Knowledge or wisdom? Something to think about. So they talk about writing things down in color and how you can track things and keeping up with all your special notes, your items you need to keep up with, that shopping list. No matter what happens in your life day to day, there's going to be something you're going to need to remember. Now, I find the best time to make notes or to really be focused on making notes is when the room is quiet and there are no distractions. What is one of the biggest distractions we have in our lives when we're at home trying to do things, when we're sitting down? Television. So making notes while you're watching TV is a distraction. Turn the TV off, let the room be quiet. You can totally focus on making those notes, making that list, writing down things you need to remember. dates, times, appointments. You ever had an appointment you were supposed to make and you didn't write it down, and you went the following day or you went the next week and the person said, no, that was yesterday or that was last week. You're like, no, I got it. No, I didn't write it down. Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. Write it down. That's what our topic is today. Write it down. And in our pantry section today, we're going to talk about all the things you use for writing things down, because there's no excuse for us not to have things for writing. And like some of us, we have those containers where we put all the pencils and pens in, the cup, the can, the special office equipment where you can put all your pens, one of those collectors. When you're making your notes, sit at the table by that collection of pens and pencils. Now, there's nothing as frustrating as having a beautiful, expensive pen and the doggone thing doesn't write. The ink is dried up. There's no ink in it. You go to write, man, you're scratching, about to scratch a hole in the paper because there's no ink in it. It's dried up and you're just mad. But when you buy that cup where you got several pens and or pencils, you can grab something else. Always make it a point to sharpen your pencils too. Keep them sharp so you can write it down. So if the lead breaks or it gets dull, you can go to another one. It's nothing like breaking your train of thought and having to go sharpen a pencil or look for another pencil because, there's nothing to write with. For mechanical pencils, you break the leads and all the lead is gone and you don't know where your lead refills are for writing things down. So take heed to what I'm sharing with you this morning. It is very important when you're dealing with things of importance to write them down, and write them down in the same place as often as you can, and write them down so you can have that list and you don't forget when you go to the store. People like to write things down on the calendar so they don't forget appointments. You go to the doctor and they say, you want me to give you an appointment card. You take the appointment card. You don't transfer it to your calendar at home. And you got to go back to your memory. You put it on your phone. I'm going to put it in my phone. And you always depending on the new technology way of doing things versus the old school tried and true way of just writing it down. And if you have poor handwriting, this is time to practice how to write better. Improve your skills at writing and to write better. That's another thing. And I'm very saddened at the fact that in this day and time, there's not a lot of teaching of writing, cursive writing. I'm not talking about printing. Again, printing is printing the alphabets to make words. That's printing. When you get a contract, it says, print your name, sign your name. Signing is writing. That's writing. They want you to write it. That skill is not being taught as much as it needs to be to children in elementary school. You're going to have to sign your name for something. Contract, buying a car, buying a house, buying something, getting a credit card, signing your name on the back of a credit card. Writing is a skill. Printing very distinctly is a skill. And I know that for a fact because my first corporate job, because I could print very well, helped me to get a job in the field of design of products. And when you had to design these mechanical drawings, writing, printing the numbers, not like you normally do. You have to be precise. Printing the notes for the part you're drawing has to be very legible and precise. That was one of the reasons I got the job, because my writing was good. But other than that, you got to write it down so you don't forget things, because otherwise it's going to be poof, you're going to forget. and then you're going to have a problem. Got it? All right. This is the Kitchings Table, heard every Tuesday morning on WBISLP 106.9 FM. Roku, GPAC 23, Facebook Live, and YouTube are the other platforms that carry this show, so you can be in tune. And I hope that the show is providing you with something of substance every time we bring it to you. And if so, call or write the station. Write the station, huh? You got that? Write the station and let them know, hey, I heard this on the Kitchings Table, or I appreciate y'all having a show like that in your programming. Something always new, provocative, interesting, something we didn't think about, something that, wow, it made me think on that show, because that guy seems to just come out of nowhere with some of the stuff he comes up with. So our topic for today here on the Kitchings Table is called Write It Down. And what we're talking about is when you have things of importance you need, write them down so that you can get them taken care of. Now we move on to our pantry section of our show. And as we say every week, the pantry section is that added little bit of information that we bring to you. And today we're going to be talking about writing implements. Writing implements, writing instruments, writing tools, whatever you want to call those things you write notes down with, or make your jot notes down, or take things down with. That is our pantry section today. A writing implement or writing instrument is an object used to produce writing. Writing is one of the most important inventions of humanity, because writing is another form of communicating. Talking is a form of communicating. Sounds are forms of communicating. Writing are forms of communication, and it's important. Writing has allowed us to record history, ideas, discoveries, spread them, put them in books. And the instruments and the techniques for this has been very important. Early writing tools did not use pigments to mark the surfaces. And, paper is a very important thing that was made, and it was made from a plant called papyrus. And after it was invented and flattened out and smoothed out and dried out, it became a paper. And that was something that came from the time of the Egyptians a long time ago. Chinese used to write on turtle shells. Ancient Sumerians and Babylonians used triangular stylus to write in soft clay tablets, which would later be baked so that you could have it legible and hard. Romans wrote in wax tablets with styluses, which allowed them to erase. All of these methods had advantages and disadvantages. Clay tablets could break. Wax tablet could not sustain heat. So we've had writing around for a long time, and then we've had instruments for writing for a long time, or implements. So before I go into the writing instruments history, did you know that January the 23rd is National Handwriting Day? I never heard of it either. Introduced by Writing Instrument Manufacturers Association in 1977, so it's not that old, to promote the sale of writing materials. National Handwriting Day has become an opportunity to celebrate manuscript and cursive writing and remind ourselves why it's so important for students' literacy to be developed. You can read it, but you can't write it. You can write it, but you can't read it. You got to have both. You got to be able to do both. So why was January the 23rd selected as National Handwriting Day? In addition to it being John Hancock's birthday, Hancock is known for writing or signing the Declaration of Independence, and signatures are often referred to as your John Hancock. Put your John Hancock on this document. Write this down. Write it down. Write your signature. And this was validated back in 1776. So the first fountain pens appeared in the 10th century. Question. Pencils came about in 1500 AD. So they've been around for a long time. One of the things that makes our human civilization important is writing. Without it, great ideas would be forgotten. Great ideas would be forgotten. Information would stay at place where it originated. And we would have to invent things 1,000 times over if we didn't write it down, if you didn't record it. And I like to share this point. Every man-made item, 99% of everything made by man requires math, because it has to be mathematically drawn to a scale so that you can manufacture it for mass production. Everything man-made uses math. You got to draw it based on numbers. Keep that in mind. So we've had writing implements for a very long time. So let's start with the first one, the history of the reed pen, one of the most sophisticated writing tools in history. They appeared after the carving tools and styluses and practically replaced them. Then we had quill pens, another sophisticated writing instrument. Large birds gave us quill pens. A feather from a large bird was cut at an angle, giving it a sharp point. You dipped it in some ink and wrote on paper. Now, you had to dip and write a lot, but it certainly helped us with the writing. Fountain pens replaced the more standard metal pens because they were easy to use and were less messy. After those were improved, we kind of went to, the old ink cartridges, or you had to draw ink out of a well in order to put it in an ink pen. Pen and ink marked the start of an era of recording information easier. Again, scientific discoveries, man continuing to find a way to improve the quality of life. Ballpoint pens, invented about 130 years ago, and they were originally intended for writing on leather. Today, billions are made and sold every year, and you can't imagine going a day without a ballpoint pen. And I have an account with a company called the National Pen Company, and they got all kinds of pens. Now, of course, a lot of ballpoint pens comes in all shapes. The barrels, all kind of materials, plastic, metal. Ink pens where you actually use liquid ink, ink cartridges. Those types of pens are around. So the ballpoint pen, and how many of you remember the big pens, BIC, the big pens? Man, you were something special on the first day of school when you got to middle school and you had one or two big pens. That big pen was like, man, the pen to have. That clear barrel, so you could see that long barrel with the ink in it and the cap that fit on top and whatever color ink was in the cartridge. Man, those were the best pens. Still are. Although a lot of other pens have been invented since then or taking their place. But hey, you were cool, man. And somebody would borrow. You know how people like to borrow a pen? You know how like people like to collect pens? They see a pen, you go to an office and they have a pen in the little container or the pen holder, pencil holder. And yeah, they don't mind you taking the pens. But, sometimes when you got a special pen, that very special pen you like to write with, the special pen that somebody says, can I borrow your pen? And you take very slow pace to give them that pen. and you watch them use your pen and give it back. You don't even walk away because people will have that tendency to take that pen, slide it into their pocket or purse, and now you lost your favorite pen. Those are the pens that you really, really, really keep an eye on. Then we have mechanical pencils, dates back to the 16th century, simple mechanisms. And now we have either you can click it or you can twist it and the lead comes out and you write with those. They break off. You just click it or, mash the button. Again, when I was doing technical drawings, we had a little bit more of a drafting pen or a pen for drawing that the lead would be thicker. You would put it in the lead sharpener and sharpen that lead in that mechanical pen. And it was heavyweight too. It was about so long, like almost like a pencil, the length of a pencil, but it was metal. And that lead in there was very heavy. And man, you could do a lot of drawing on paper with it. So yeah, you had those. Then we started having colored pencils. Colored pencils started surfacing around the start of the 20th century. And colored pencils are used a lot for artistic work. But in academia, I remember when your teacher would grade your papers for corrections or low scores or scoring things, they would write your scores or correct your paper in red pencil, or if you got something good, you would get it in blue pencil. But there used to be a pencil that was red on one end and with a red lead on one end and a blue lead on the other end. And the teacher, depending on what they're correcting or addressing, would mark up your paper. And it was nothing worse than getting a big red F on your work. That was embarrassing. However, it made your work harder. But color pencils are primarily for people who do pencil drawings, artists, people like that. Then another writing implement, although you don't write with it, is called the eraser. And in the technical field of drawing, they didn't say erase your, if you messed up something, if you misdrew something, they didn't say you have to erase it. You use an eraser to erase it. They say you make a correction. Don't erase it, make a correction. That sounds a lot better than I had to erase all this stuff. No, I corrected it. So eraser, made out of form of rubber, some form of rubber that's manufactured. They've been around for a long time. Then the eraser that is on the top of a pencil. Some kids used to chew the pencils, chew the erasers. You ever seen somebody just chew on a pencil? You don't even want to use the pencil. They gnawed it all up, teeth marks all over the pencil. That was one way to keep you from borrowing their pencils too. And my favorite pencil is a Dixon Ticonderoga pencil. That yellow pencil, the green lead to hold the eraser in. Some of the finest writing pencils, man. You get a box of those, man, that's gold. A number 2 leaded Dixon Ticonderoga pencil, man, you got a very fine writing instrument. Now, you got to have one thing if you're going to use a pencil, and that's a pencil sharpener. And these are like knives to sharpen pencils, colored pencils, regular pencils. Rotate. When you got one of those old rotating, pencil sharpener, you had to crank by hand, and it had like the triple blades in there that would just sharpen your pencil. Then they came up with the electric pencil sharpener. But the old little small pencil sharpener that just had like the one single blade and you would twist it in order to sharpen your pencil. All those are needed in order to sharpen your pencils. Now, we've talked about pencils, pens, erasers, sharpeners. Let's move on to marker pens. And these have a different type of ink. And like ink, if that marker ink gets in your clothes, man, you forget it coming out. Just forget it. You're not going to get it out. But these became very popular. And now the markers are a very popular thing because they come in different point sizes, ultra fine, fine, regular, then big, or the other name for super large. But markers have become very popular. Chisel tip, straight tip, very popular. From just the regular markers came the highlighters. And the highlighters are kind of like a transparent colored ink to highlight passages when you're reading so that you can go back and remember them. So they put them on your computers, your highlighter. And if you really want to see somebody who's done a lot of highlighting, go to church and look at somebody's Bible, and they've highlighted it all up with popular colors: yellow, pink, and orange. Popular highlighting colors. So these have been an influence. And then aside from the regular ink that comes in our pens, they invented the gel pens. Now those pens, very smooth and easy when they're flowing, right very, very well. Strong lines, nice colors, used by everybody. Very nice pens. Then we move to the ink brush and calligraphy. Now, Chinese have used calligraphy for a very long time. It's a brush and ink to make Chinese letters and symbols. That is a very, very learned skill. It takes some time to learn how to do calligraphy. Very long time. You got to be real good to deal with that. Then we move on to crayon. And of course, Crayola, the number one company for crayon. And it was nothing like having that. Your first box of crayon was a box of 8, just standard colors. You moved on to that box of 16, a few more colors. Then you moved to that box of 32, man. The box got big and had a little flip top. And then, you started collecting crayon wherever you saw them. Nothing like coloring in a coloring book with your crayon, coloring nice pictures. When you're young, you don't care about how good it looks. You're just trying to make it a picture look, whatever color you choose to color it with. Crayons started back in the 19th century. And of course, they're important to children. And what are they made of? I mean, most of us may know, but some of us may not know. What are crayons made of? Do you know? Wax. They're made from wax, made of wax. And I'm sure to see them make crayon from start to finish is a very fascinating product to watch in manufacturing, because wax dyes to make all the colors, make them in the shapes, put the wrappers on them, put them in the boxes. All that has got to be fascinating. I'm fascinated to watch those kind of things because it's like somebody had to think of that. It didn't just happen. Crayons, another writing instrument. And finally, there's this thing called dip pens. And they replaced the quills. Well, you dip it in ink. And again, it's used for drawing and writing. Dip pens, quill pens. So that concludes our pantry section of the day, writing implements and instruments. You're listening and watching the Kitchings Table on WBISLP 106.9 FM, Awesome Radio. You can catch us on Facebook Live, YouTube, Roku, and GPAC 23 platforms. You can catch the Kitchings Table. I'm your host, Earl Kitchings, every Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock here on Awesome Radio. I'm happy to be with you and hope that you join me for whatever item of news and interest importance that we can bring to you. So our title for today's show is Write It Down. We're talking about the importance of writing things down, why it's important to do that, to remember things that you need to remember so that you don't forget them, so that those things happen. So Why? What are some of the tips, facts, or ideas about writing things down and taking notes? In an article for Staples by Margaret Lester, talks about, well, of course, we like to write on our electronic tablets, laptops, phones. We, scroll there. But in 2014, a research paper by by researchers at Princeton and UCLA, found that students who took notes by hand had a deeper conceptual understanding of the subject matter and were able to apply and integrate the information better than students taking notes on laptops or other electronic devices. Why is that so important? Or how is it that that's the way to do it as opposed to writing it down on these electronic devices? Here's what they say. The reason is cognitive processing. You say that's a fancy term for how our brains evaluate, store, and recall information, and then use it to solve problems and make decisions. Cognitive processing. I'm going to say that again for you. A fancy way for our brains to evaluate, store, and recall information, and then use it to solve problems and make decisions. You can probably say critical thinking is also part of that cognitive processing. Researchers found that when we take notes by hand, we listen more carefully. There's a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing does not require a lot of focus and attention. Listening requires undistracted, devoted attention to what someone is saying. When we're doing this, it distills the information we hear and we summarize it. And rather than writing everything down verbatim, as we're prone to do when we're typing, this allows us some flexibility. Then they also say writing by hand may even increase our confidence. And that is one thing a lot of people seem to have problems with. Confidence, self-esteem. Bad handwriting means you don't want to write something down. If you can't read very well, you don't want anyone to ask you to read aloud. If you can't read with understanding, it makes it very difficult for you to read things and know what the article or the message is saying. So these things are important. So we talk about processing. And an educational consultant by the name of Richard Gentry says that taking notes by hand is more productive for processing information. It's more productive because you're more selective and organized, and it helps you synthesize your thoughts at a deeper level. When you're writing, you can circle, you can make arrows, you can make notations, you can make all kinds of little symbols around what you're taking notes for. And these are things that are important for helping us remember things or retain information. Rory Brisky, who's a consultant, says this: write, draw, and even to go back to areas I've already written or edited, clarify or added commentary when I write things down. This is what makes it easy for me. He likes to write arrows or underlines, drawings, little drawings by his notes, stars, words scratched out, changed, all sorts of other annotations, and those things make for clarifications. So when you're writing your notes, so if you want to remember it with a little bit more intensity, you make notes on your notes, little symbols and gestures. Then non-linear thinking. Thinking outside the box, thinking outside the norm. Pen and paper help to do that. non-linear thinking, writing stuff down. Then for perspective, this also helps you when we're talking about getting perspective. Brisky says, I can easily scratch something out or to draw a circle around it or jot a note with question mark or any other one of the 100 annotations by hand. Then on that tablet, on that phone, it's easier. And you know, when you're trying to write something with your finger on your phone, it's not as accurate. You got to click it and start all over. Writing on paper allows you to do things at a much faster speed with much better ease and makes it more precise so that you can retain the information. And it maybe even help you remember better what you wrote in your notes versus electronic. Electronic is good to transfer a lot of times what you've written into legible form for, for publication purposes. But for writing something quick and easy and helping to retain, man, you got to write it down. You ever been somewhere and you're taking notes and you're trying to keep up with somebody speaking or talking, lecturing? It's not an easy thing. But if you can write well, know how to make notes, make symbols to give you directions about what you wrote, it's not a problem. And then Nate Hansen, who is the CEO of Summary organization, says use notebooks as a creative break from computers and other technology. Notebooks, not the electronic notebook, a real notebook, one filled with paper. Writing something down on paper. Notebooks, spiral tablets, the ones you get doing when it's a new school year, you can find all those tablets, notebooks, whatever, man, dirt cheap. 10, sometimes you got to find them on sale 10 cents per tablet, depending on the size and what you're looking for. But, to buy them, for less than $1, you can get 2, 3 of them for $1. Anything that you can get at a discounted price is what you're looking for. So you can write it down. And the other thing about notebooks and writing things down are these two things. Writing it down on just blank sheets of paper or on rule line paper. Notebooks have the rule lines, legal pads have the rule lines, but just taking some paper, you buy a ream of paper and you just take paper out and start writing. That's good. If you don't care about whether your notes are going up the hill or down the hill or slanted, it doesn't matter. You're just trying to capture what you want to remember and notate. So paper is important. Your writing instrument is important. Putting those two things together to remember your notes, what you need to remind yourself of, appointments, instruments, paper, writing instruments and paper. All these things. And they've made it easier for you too, because now you have sticky notes. You got the little sticky notes. You can make a short note to yourself and stick it on something. I know that's been a great teaching tool for children. You write out a word and stick it to the object, and you teach the child how to spell it, pronounce it, and see the item that you're talking about. A great tool. But if you can't write well, if you can't print well, that child is in trouble. But the sticky notes, very valuable piece of paper for writing notes on, for jotting notes down on, and you can stick it someplace. So all in all, if you have something important that you want to remember, you don't want to forget, you want to make sure someone else gets the information, you want them not to forget it, you want to make sure that the notes that you are writing when you're listening to a lecturer or somebody giving you information, that you got it. Don't rely on your electronic device for taking notes. Write it down. Pencil or pen to paper. Write it down. Guarantee you'll do a better job at focusing, remembering, and keeping everything somewhat organized so that you don't rely totally on your mind. Got it? All right. That's going to do it for me today here on the Kitchings Table. As always, glad to be with you here on Awesome Radio, WBISLP 106.9 FM. Join me next Tuesday morning here for another edition of the Kitchings Table. Till then, we're going to say so long, have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time.